Hello again. We're now ready for the fifth study in this series on marriage and the family. Today what we're going to speak about is the greatness of married love. We're going to spend most of our time in the Song of Solomon, but we will be speaking about other scriptures as well. So before we get into the actual text, as I give some introductory remarks, you may want to turn in your Bibles to the Song of Solomon, and we'll begin when we get there at chapter 1. You know, married love is very special. It is special for numerous reasons. Just consider this, for example. It is special because it is different. It is different than the love that friends might have. And you know, friends can really have a strong love between themselves. In fact, it can be so strong that their friendship will last for a lifetime. They'll share each other's joys and burdens. They'll be there when the other one needs them, and so many different things like that. And yet, it's not the same as married love. There's something different about married love. How about in family? You know, families can really be devoted to each other. I'm speaking about as far as brothers and sisters, parents with their children and so forth, and grandparents and the aunts and uncles and cousins, nieces and nephews. There can be a real strong bond there. It can last for a lifetime too, of course. But it's still not the same as the love that occurs between a husband and wife. There's something different about that. Or consider about the parents toward their own children. That love can be mighty too. It's very special in itself. In fact, parents, without even thinking, will lay down their lives for their children. They'll risk their lives to save their children. But still again, the love that parents have for their children is not the same that a husband and wife have for each other. It's a very special kind of love, and we'll be seeing that a little bit later. Married love is also special because it's a holy type of love as opposed to all the perversions that are out there in the world today. I'm sure you know that how a lot of times fornication, especially premarital sex in our society, is often called love or making love. And that's not new. Why, even in biblical times, people were perverting true love. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 7, verse 18, Solomon speaks about the adulteress who refers to the act of adultery as being love. And of course, he's not endorsing it there, but he's just showing the deception under which she can operate, and that a young man needs to be careful that he not be led astray, because it's not love, is Solomon's point. She says it's love. Society says it is love. Friends might say that it's love, but it's not. And of course, how many times do we hear love and lust confused? In fact, it happens so much that it's easy for us to not even know what true biblical spiritual love is, because it is perverted so much. And lust is so many times called love, when really that's all that it is lust or lasciviousness or licentiousness and other related terms. So what we want to do is we want to go to the Song of Solomon, and we want to understand from a man, Solomon, who had God himself impart to him wisdom. And by that wisdom, he's going to let us know what married love really is. And as we go through the Song of Solomon, we're going to find 12 different points from this book. I really wish we had the time to look at every verse in the book, but we don't. So we're going to look at 12 highlights of the book that will show us the greatness of married love. Our first point is this: married love is great because it is better than wine. This will be established in the first chapter, verses 2 through 4. Listen now to what the bride says to her groom, Solomon. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your oils have a goodly fragrance. Your name is as oil poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love you. Draw me. We will run after you. The king has brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in you. We will make mention of your love more than of wine. Rightly do they love you. Now here it's interesting to see the comparison that is made. She said that his love was greater than wine. Now we know that people drink wine or alcohol in general because it gives them some type of pleasure. That's why they do it. And yet, wine certainly has an awful potential. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8, the Bible's very clear that wine leads to riot. Do I need to tell you how that's happening in society today? Why, on the highways alone, 25,000 people lose their lives because of drunken drivers. That's just on the highways. That's not counting all the battered families, the people that lose their jobs, and all the other bad things that happen. So wine may bring some pleasure, but only for a season. And in time, it destroys. Married love is different. Yes, it provides pleasure, but it increases and it grows. So that eventually, those who are experiencing it in the marriage find all kinds of contentment. Now, number 2. The second thing we'll learn from the Song of Solomon is that one's spouse is incomparable. Married love is great because one's spouse is incomparable. Listen now to chapter 2, verse 2. Here Solomon, the groom, said to his wife, "As a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters." As a lily stands out among the thorns. Isn't it interesting that it is Solomon who made that statement? And here's why it's so interesting. Perhaps you'll remember when Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, in the 6th chapter of Matthew, Jesus said that one lily has more glory and beauty than even Solomon, who was arrayed with such great glory. And yet here's Solomon, that man who had all that glory, he's now looking at his wife, at his bride, and he says to her, "You are like a lily." Well, it seems to be he's saying that you are more beautiful, you're more glorious to me than all these possessions that God has given to me. You bring me more pleasure than all of them. A lily can really stand out in a field of thorns. In fact, in the summer of 1991, I was with my 3 daughters in our backyard, and we were looking over our back fence and looking at the field that's behind our house. And we were looking at the barn that is out there where horses are sometimes kept, and off in the distance we could see a snow-capped volcano. But then one of my daughters, looking down in this field, said, "Hey, Daddy, look at that right there." There, with a flower about 6 inches across, was this plant, a sunflower. And all of a sudden, we weren't looking at this field anymore with all the weeds and the thorns. We weren't looking at the rustic-looking barn or even the great mountain off in the distance. But we're looking at this one flower. All of our attention was right on that flower. Well, Solomon said to his bride, "You're just like that." Even though there's a lot of other beautiful things to admire in this world, they're not like you. All my attention zeroes in on you. And you have it all, my bride. And so married love stands out among everything else that a person may do. In fact, we may even see a couple that Their love is beautiful like a lily. And we may see them in a crowd and we can just spot them because there's something about the way they are with each other that shows us they love each other, perhaps more than what the other people do in the rest of the crowd. The third point, married love is great because it provides special delights. We now read verses 3 and 4 of the Song of Solomon, chapter 2. She said to him, "As the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love." You know, a forest of fruitless trees can be really beautiful to behold. I think most people are like myself. We love to look at a forest. We like to get pictures. We like to go into a forest. Maybe get off of the trail and walk among the trees and smell all the vegetation. Enjoy the fresh air, the greenery, and if there's any flowers blooming, just really catch our attention. I like to sit on one hill and look across the valley and look at the forest covering the other mountain. It's a beautiful sight. But you know something? In that state, that's all I can do is look at it and enjoy it. However, if among those trees there is a fruitful tree, such as an apple tree, and I've done this before, I've been in a forest and found a wild tree, maybe someone ate an apple and dropped the seeds there or something, I don't know, but there was this apple tree. I could go to that tree and not only enjoy its appearance and its aroma, but I could reach up and take an apple off of that thing and eat it and enjoy its sweet, juicy flavor. Well, she here in Song of Solomon is saying, Solomon, you're like that to me. I can enjoy the sweetness of our relationship. Indeed, there's a lot of beautiful people in this world for us to behold. But only in marriage can we enjoy the sweetness of another person. Number 4, married love is great because it causes love sickness. Watch now what she says to Solomon in verse 5, still in the 2nd chapter. She said, "Stay me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick from love." She was not sick of love, but love kind of produced a sickness-like condition about her. You know, when you're sick, literally in the body, it weakens your body. And even after you've recovered from the sickness itself, you still need nutritious and energetic food to bring you back to where you were before. You know, love is like that too. Love can have an effect on us as though we were sick. We don't really desire to eat. We just kind of seem to be off in another world. In fact, I can remember as a teenager sitting down at the table and to eat, and my mother saying, "So what's her name?" I looked around, "Well, whose name? What are you talking about, Mom?" I said, "Well, what's your girlfriend's name?" "Girlfriend? What are you talking about? I don't have a girlfriend." "How do you know I have a girlfriend?" She says, "You haven't been eating. You've been acting different. I've noticed that you're not really all here." And I had to confess she was right. I don't know what it is about mothers, but they've got eyes in the back of their head and on their elbows, and they place their eyes everywhere so they can see what we're doing. They know, especially when we're in love, at least as we think of it at that time, because it's kind of like how she said here, there's a sickness about us. We're not literally sick in the body, but we're kind of acting like it. We're just not really all there. And that's how she was experiencing love with her groom, Solomon. Number 5, married love is great because it gives delightful assurance. It gives delightful assurance. Still in the 2nd chapter, let's look at verse 14. He said to her, "O my dove, that art in the clefts of the rock, in the covert of the steep place, let me see your countenance. Let me hear your voice. for sweet is your voice, and your countenance is comely. A crack in a rock can hide what would normally be an otherwise obvious flower. But if you happen to get a glimpse of that flower growing in the crack of that rock, you suddenly want to see more, don't you? In the summer of '91, my wife and I, along with two of our friends, climbed a mountain called Mount Scott. It's on the east side of Crater Lake in Oregon. And as we're going up in the higher elevations, where the trees weren't quite as plentiful and where they were smaller, we're going by these rocks, and I happened to notice that one of the rocks was split open, and I was just wanting to look inside the crack, and I discovered a flower. And I walked around more, tried to get all the different angles that I could on it. I got my wife and our friends to come over and look at it. And pretty soon we noticed there were more rocks with cracks in them. And we saw all these flowers that in our rush to walk by we never would have seen before. And married love is like that too. When that love is hidden like that flower in the rock, we can't see it. Maybe for some reason we're separated for a while. Maybe a business trip or something like that. But if we're like Solomon here, we want to see our love's face again. We want to hear our love's voice. We can't wait for that time. And we're looking like in that crack of the rock. And that's why married love is so great, because it gives such wonderful delights as that. Number 6, married love is great because it is built on a strong desire for togetherness. We now look at chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. Let's listen now to what the bride had to say here. By night on my bed, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but I found him not. I said, I will rise now and go about the city, in the streets and in the broadways. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but I found him not. The watchmen that go about the city found me, to whom I said, have you seen him whom my soul loves? It was but a little that I passed from them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go, until I had brought him into my mother's house and into the chamber of her that conceived me. Why is it that a man and a woman marry in the first place? They have a strong desire to be together. Now, in a previous lesson, I reminded you of probably what you said in your vows to one another on your wedding day. And again, I would like to read what you may have said to one another when you made your vows, and listen to them now with the point of seeing why you married. That is, that you wanted to be together. Listen carefully. I, blank, take you, blank, to be my wedded wife or husband, to have and to hold from this day forward. Well, that almost sounds like Song of Solomon 3, doesn't it? For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death parts us, according to God's holy ordinance, and thereto I give my vow of marriage. Isn't that togetherness? Yes. If you said those words, you were saying, I want to be with you forever till the day of our death. And that's what's being said right here. She said, he was away from me, and I didn't like that. I married him because I wanted to be with him. So I went looking for him. And when I found him, man, I grabbed a hold of him and I says, you're not leaving me again. We're going to stick together. And marriages that often experience hurt will experience it because in some way the togetherness has been violated. Maybe they're divorced. Maybe there's a lot of business trips and maybe just too many. Or maybe they're both always at home. They live in the same house, but they're not together in spirit. And so they're hurt. Bitterness results and other bad things, and Sometimes the marriage itself just ends. And so we've got to make sure that we're working on the togetherness with which we desire to build our marriage in the first place. Number 7, married love is great because it is a special knowledge. Now we turn to chapter 4, and we're going to look now at verses 9 and 10, and listen very carefully to what Solomon says to his bride now. You have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. You have ravished my heart with one of your eyes, with one chain of your neck. How fair is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than all manner of spices. Now, chapter 4, with the exception of verse 16, is Solomon describing her in a way that only he should know personally. Yes, he describes to us the words and so forth, but only Solomon should have been the only one who ever really knew the exact details of what he is speaking about here. And then she does the same thing with him in chapter 5, verses 10 through 16. You see, they're gaining a knowledge of each other that no one else on this planet should ever be able to experience. If they do, then something's wrong, unless, of course, death has taken place and then a remarriage. But married love is very special. It's great. Because here, such as in the 4th and 5th chapters, a husband and wife can enjoy at least one thing from the Garden of Eden. Have you ever thought about that? You know, there's a lot of things about the Garden of Eden that we cannot experience today. But there is at least one thing, if not others. Do you remember in our first study when we looked at Genesis chapter 2? And remember we came down to verse 25, where Moses said, and the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not ashamed. Well, only in marriage can that same experience be enjoyed today. So a part of the Garden of Eden can be here even today. Thus, the husband and wife gain a very special and unashamed knowledge of one another. In fact, maybe you've noticed in the Bible that you've never found the word sex or sexual relations or anything like that. But that particular activity is still referred to, but with a different word, such as knowing or know. Like the Bible will say that after Jesus was born, then Mary knew her husband Joseph. Now, the Bible doesn't mean that finally they got acquainted with one another. Well, they were husband and wife beforehand. They knew each other, but not until after Jesus was born. And remember, she was still a virgin up to that point. Not until afterwards did they then enjoy a knowledge that they never had of one another before. So married love is great because it provides a special knowledge. Number 8, married love is great because it overwhelms. I want you to listen carefully now to the 6th chapter, just the first half of verse 5. Listen here to what it says. And this is Solomon speaking. He said, turn away your eyes from me, for they have overcome me. Do you see what he is saying to her at this point? I don't think he really had a true desire for her to look away. No, instead it's kind of like this. He was saying, your look captivates me. Am I really this wild about you? Turn away for a moment so I can see if it's really true. And when she does, no doubt he wanted her to look back. Yes, their love was overwhelming. There was a longing for them to be together and to see each other, for their eyes to meet and not to be looking anywhere else. Number 9, married love is great because it has a special oneness to it. There's unity that cannot be enjoyed anywhere else. Now, I'm going to be reading from the 7th chapter of the Song of Solomon. We're going to read verses 10 through 13. And I realize here that really there's a primary application of this passage. And what I'm going to be doing here is making the secondary application. And that is the idea of their oneness, of their unity. Watch now as to how this is worded. I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth into the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see whether the vine has budded and its blossom is open and the pomegranates are in flower. There will I give you my love. The mandrakes give forth fragrance, and at our doors are all manner of precious fruits, new and old, which I have laid up for you, O my beloved. Do you see then how there was a very simple desire for them to be with each other in everything that they did? They did not lead separate lives, but as the Bible says, when a man and a woman come together as husband and wife, they are now one flesh. That's what's happening in the Song of Solomon. They're one. She says, let us do this together. Let us do that together. Let's go over here and over there together. I want it to be the two of us, Solomon. And he certainly fulfilled that wish for her. In Romans 12, verse 10, the Bible says that as Christians, we should in honor prefer one another. Well, if that's true about our Christian relationships, shouldn't it also be true about the marital relationship, especially if the husband and wife are both Christians? Oh, definitely. They should in honor prefer one another above anyone else. Number 10. Married love is great because it is a kindred spirit. We now look at the Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 1. And listen to the way she describes in very poetic terms the way that she wanted Solomon to be like her brother. She now says, oh, that you were as my brother, that sucked the breasts of my mother. When I should find you without, I would kiss you. Yea, and none would despise me. You see, she realized that married love is more than just friendship. Indeed, it is friend, like how we observed from Genesis chapter 2 in the first lesson. We noticed that a man and his wife should be best friends. But that's not all that they should be. It goes much deeper than that. It goes much further. It's family. That's what she's saying here in a poetic way. She's saying, Solomon, I wish you were as close to me, as related to me, as my own brother. Indeed, when you read the Song of Solomon, you will notice how frequently he especially is calling her my sister. And here he is calling her, or she is calling him my brother. So yes, it can go very deep. That's how strong married love is. Number 11. Married love is great because it is strong. Listen to verses 6 and 7 now of this 8th chapter and watch how she describes the awesome strength of love. She said to Solomon, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as cruel as Sheol. The flashes thereof are flashes of fire, a very flame of Jehovah. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, he would utterly be contemned. That is, other people would say, you've done a very silly thing, that you would give up everything you've got for love's sake. But her point is, that's how strong love is. In fact, notice how she started out. She said, Solomon, I want you to set me as a seal upon your heart as well as upon your arm. What is a seal? One of the things that a seal is it's a mark of ownership. Well, in one sense, today, even with our wedding bands, we use these to let other people know that, hey, he or she is mine. We own each other. She says, listen, Solomon, yes, I want to be a seal upon your arm. I want people to know that I am yours and you're mine, but let it be true also on the inside. Let it also be true that I am a seal upon your heart and that I am indeed that close to you. I'm not just at your side so that I'm next to your arm, but you have me deep inside you, right upon your very heart itself. But notice also that she said, love is as strong as death. Now, at first, that may not seem like a very good comparison. I mean, after all, love is a good thing and death is horrible, but she's trying to compare the two as far as their strength. My friends, is there anything in nature that is more powerful than death? No. In fact, if death decides to grab a hold of you, you're not going to escape it. It will take you into its arms and never let go. Well, she said, Solomon, that's how my love is for you. That's how I want your love to be for me. As strong as death itself. So strong that it'll be like a fire of God that cannot be put out with the floods of waters that may come upon the earth. Nothing, Solomon, should ever drown out our love for one another. The last point that we want to take from the Song of Solomon, the 12th point, is this, that married love is great because it is peace. It is peaceful. Still, again, we're in this last chapter, and we now read from verses 10 through 12, where she said to him, I am a wall, and my breasts thereof like the towers thereof. Then was I in his eyes as one that found peace. And now she's going to explain how that is. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal-Hamon. He let out the vineyard unto keepers. Every one for the fruit thereof was to bring 1,000 pieces of silver. My vineyard, which is mine, is before me. You, O Solomon, shall have the 1,000, and those that keep the fruit thereof, 200. In other words, she's saying, Solomon, I am like those vineyards that we pay so much attention to protect. You see, in ancient times, as I'm sure you know, cities had these walls around them for protection from an advancing army. They had the towers so that they could see off into the distance to see when this army was coming. Well, in the same way, ancient farmers also had to protect their vineyards. They'd put walls around them, or maybe towers if it was necessary, especially if it was a very valuable crop or produced good fruit. Because when that invading army would come, why, they would want to destroy the crops as well as the city. And that happened quite frequently, because if you can do that, you've then crippled that city or nation, not only by destroying their town, but also by destroying their food. So you put up this wall to protect your vineyard. She's saying, listen, Solomon, I have reserved myself just for you. I am a vineyard. I am your vineyard. And I am protected. No one else shall invade our relationship. All others are going to be kept out. Solomon, it's just you and I with one another. Now, don't you think that that would bring peace into his mind, that he could know that? Just like there would be that wall around the ancient vineyards, and the farmers could farm in peace. With security, they knew that someone else wouldn't come and steal them. Well, he could have the same assurance with his bride. Since all of this is true that we've just read from the Song of Solomon, perhaps now when we turn to Ephesians chapter 5, maybe this passage where it speaks about the husband loving his wife will have much more meaning to us now. Now, in this context, I have not been speaking about just the love of the husband toward the wife, but of both of their loves toward one another. And so as we read Ephesians 5, I would also like for the women to consider that their love should be the same as Paul says the love of a husband ought to be towards his wife. And notice how Paul says that love ought to be like Christ toward the church. Watch now. In verse 25, he said that the husband is to give up himself for his wife, or again we can say the wife for her husband, even as Christ did for the church. Here's what verse 25 says. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for it. That's an awesome love, isn't it? It was so strong that Jesus suffered excruciating pain because he loved us. And that same love, that same degree of love should be in a marriage. Now notice this in verses 26 and 27, how that when that love exists, it causes the other one to be beautified. Here Paul wrote that when Jesus loved the church and gave himself up for it, he did it for three reasons. Number one, that he might sanctify it, having cleansed it by the washing of water with the word. And number two, that he might present the church to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that number three, it should be holy and without blemish. Now, did you catch what was being said here? Jesus, by so loving the church, beautified the church in her holiness. Well, Paul is saying, I believe, that a husband can love his wife in such a way that she'll be sanctified, that she will keep herself only for him so long as they both shall live. She'll be holy and without blemish. She'll devote herself just to him and not to some other man. And again, we could reverse that whole thing as well. In verses 28 through 30, we're told that his love for her is really, in a sense, loving himself. Even so, ought husbands also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He that loves his own wife loves himself. For no man ever hated his own flesh, but he nourishes it and cherishes it, even as Christ also the church, because we are members of his body. He loves her, and he benefits by it, because by loving her, the Bible says that Jesus treated the church like his own body. Well, a husband treats his wife like his own body, and the wife should do the same thing. So they're really helping themselves. And finally, in verse 31, in love they cling to one another. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. I hope then that when you look at a passage like this that says a husband and wife ought to love each other, that you'll keep in mind what we've seen from the Song of Solomon, that married love is great. We'll see you next time.